Good morning, everyone. I hope you're all feeling okay. We only have 23 minutes with you this morning, so I'm going to give a quick whip round, and then we're going to dive in with each of the panelists, talking about what UX as an opiate for the masses means for them. So, would you like to intro yourself quickly?
You want me to introduce Hinge, or you want me to talk about UX?
Both. So name, and then also, well, actually, already set up there. So what your idea about UX as an opiate for the masses might mean.
Yeah, so I don't think that anyone necessarily sets out to build UX as an opiate for the masses. I think most people set out to build some sort of utility, something that enriches someone's life, serves them in some way. But over time, as you start driving towards business metrics, a lot of companies will naturally tend toward creating a UX that becomes addictive, becomes a game, competes for your attention, and we've seen that in the dating industry, and that's why we're trying to take a very different path with Hinge.
And before I move to Tristan, can you just tell us a little bit about how at Hinge you kind of course corrected for this and you changed your measurements?
Yeah, so Hinge started in 2011 as a friends of friends dating app. And what we found as we evolved over time, we had a very similar interface to the other apps that you see out there, these swiping apps where a face pops up and you swipe them left or you swipe them right. And if it's a match, then you start chatting, presumably. What we found is that this interface just wasn't leading to relationships. In fact, it was quite the opposite. It was seemingly keeping people single. It was giving them infinite choice. You always felt like something was better around the corner. It attracted people who weren't looking for relationships at all. Every time you logged into the app, it was just shoving more people in your face instead of helping you focus on the people that you've already connected with. And so we realized, we tried to make some tweaks to fix this with feature additions in the app, and just couldn't really move the needle in really helping people connect and find relationships. So what we decided to do what we figured out was that this swiping mechanic was at the core of what was keeping people single, and basically just turning this into a matching game where fewer than like 7% of matches would actually turn into a conversation. And so we decided last year to sort of rip down and rebuild an entirely new interface that would actually help people connect, and in a sense we've done that. I mean, I can dive into the details, but now we're in a world where more than half of matches turn into a full conversation, where people are talking five times as often, and we will see it's been on the market about a month now, but we're growing way faster as a result, because I think we're doing something very different, that it's actually providing a service to people, even if it's not as addicting, even though people are only spending 10 to 15 minutes in it a day, not 90 minutes like some of the other dating apps will brag about.
So changing what it means to have a successful interaction. Tristan, what can you tell us about UX as an opiate for the masses and what that means, especially in this current climate?
Well, so I used to be a design ethicist at Google. And what that meant was I was really concerned about how 50 designers working at Apple, Google, and Facebook essentially design the attentional lives of 1 billion people when we wake up in the morning and we check this thing, right? And it programs 1 billion people to think about who they owe a response to, what they think they have to do today, and what they're going to pay attention to. And I'm not just talking about the filter bubble or newsfeed stuff. I'm talking about just attention. The attention economy is an unbounded competition to get attention at any cost. So whether people are building a meditation app or a dating website or a news website or a game or Facebook or Snapchat, at the end of the day, everyone is competing for attention. There's no one who's not competing for attention. So if we use that frame to have the conversation, then the question becomes, what are the rules of engagement to get attention? Because as we saw this morning, I said yesterday on stage, it's like Donald Trump was kind of a runaway AI who's able to say anything that worked to get attention. And it doesn't really matter if it's true or not. It's just about getting attention. And if we create a platform that leaves open a vulnerability where if you're an adversary, you know how to hack the platform, you can get your message to spread through that attention economy. So what's the responsibility of designers who make these products that leave open social psychological vulnerabilities and pathways for certain messages to spread? This is no different from what magicians do or marketers do, but the companies providing the platforms have a responsibility. And I think when we talk about UX as an opiate for the masses, the reason we talk about that is that what we typically talked about with design, about making things human-centered and helping people have these really easy-to-use interactions, design becomes this co-opted by this exercise to maximize engagement. So what starts off as genuine intentions to make people's lives better will ultimately start to become engagement design decisions. How do I get people to come back? How do I get people to stay longer? And that becomes this race to the bottom, unless you do something bold like what Hinge is doing, or what companies hopefully in sort of a time well spent movement would be doing, where you actually care about values. And I think we need to radically reform the attention economy given what happened today. And I'd love to have that conversation too.
Quite right. Now, Adam, I know that you've done some really interesting work about changing the way in which you engage with customers, as well as finding new ways to support your business time. Can you talk about how you've oriented around your values with some of your native advertising pieces?
Yeah, absolutely. So, one of the things we've been doing, and if you go to time.com right now and you take a look at the site, especially on desktop, it's littered with ads. I mean, there's an ad on the top, there's an ad on the left side, there's an ad on the bottom. They're all blinking, they're all moving, and you have about this much space to actually read your article. And as we started embarked on to redesign the site, we started to think about like, all right, well, how can we actually do this in a way that we still include ads, which are an important part of our revenue model, but we can do it in a minimalistic way so that users can actually engage, right? Because for most businesses, these guys probably deal with this all the time. You have two sets of people you're beholden to. One is your stakeholders, your investors, your shareholders, and then the other is your users. And so we try to strike a balance between the two of those things. So what you'll see with the new time.com is that we're starting to minimize some of those ads. The interface is going to be a lot cleaner, and we're also changing our revenue model. We're starting to move into native advertising, which has been growing very strongly in the past year. We just released some great numbers, which you guys can find in the press. And you're seeing this trend across the entire media industry. Many of our competitors are doing it as well. And it is this blend between sponsored content, but it's truly editorial, and it's not influenced by these brands. We try to put our stamp of approval on it and say, this is something we really believe in. And I think that's a good way to go, and people are starting to really take to it in a positive way, I think.
I think one of the things that each of you in your own ways are also pointing towards is the fact that with legacy media, it's tend to be a one-directional broadcasting type of relationship where we all just have a certain shortened choice of what we can expose ourselves to, whether it might be TV or radio. Whereas when we're talking about technologies that we actively interact with, it seems to me that we're at the stage now with people using ad blockers, tracker blockers, with banner blindness, that we're having to enter into dialogue with our customers, users, in a way that gives agency to people if they choose it and if they know that they have the choice to actually shape some of these systems. What are your thoughts and your hopes around how some of these systems can be shaped and how we empower people to make those sorts of requests and demands?
I actually have, if you don't mind, a story about that, which is funny because ad blockers, of course, something we deal with on a daily basis. It is affecting us in a small percentage, but we tried a campaign where we wanted to sort of appeal to our audience and think about like, all right, well, they're ad blocking, they don't like ads, we get it. So what we did was actually we built a little plugin that if you clicked on the ad, it would essentially break time.com. And so it literally would shatter into pieces. And, the user would be like, well, what was this? And then a message would pop up and say, you clicked, on an ad and it broke time.com, consider turning your ad blockers off, just because we would prefer to keep the site going. Our journalistic integrity and our journalism depends on the money that we get from these. So it was mildly successful, and we're trying to do other creative things to prevent people from doing it. But at the end of the day, without those ads, great journalism doesn't get produced.
So Tristan, with the kinds of movements that you're seeing and that has led to you deciding to explore in greater detail the idea of time well spent and how companies can encourage, I suppose, the people working for them to create different systems. What kind of different systems do you think are available when businesses need to be able to survive?
Right. So if you think about one thing we often don't talk about in conversations like this is the competitive game theory, right? So let's say you're YouTube and you add the autoplay feature to autoplay the next video automatically, or your Twitter and you make it autoplay the video in the feed, and suddenly people are watching more videos and they're in your feed longer. So Facebook could sit there and say, let's say Facebook just made a choice and they said, that's not really helping people. That's not really giving people agency. We don't really want to do that. But if their engagement goes down because Twitter's goes up, they have to escalate too. And then Netflix has to say, we're going to automatically count down to watch the next video, right? And then, so at the end of the day, there's a competitiveness to attention that creates some kind of escalation. And the thing that's escalating is persuasion, or how strong an influence each app has to deploy a new tactic to get people to stay. So I don't know what Time does if it's, please read the next story, or automatically scroll frictionlessly into watching the next story. Maybe you don't want to do that, but if all the other news sites do that, you have no choice. And so one of the background pieces of this conversation is the advertising business model, engagement-based advertising specifically, time-spent-based advertising, creates an unbounded hunger of each company to take as much of people's time as possible. So, the one news site that doesn't need to do this, for example, is like the BBC. If you have publicly funded media, then you can get out of that race. Now, it's hard to say that. I'm not a Marxist. When you say that, CNN and all these other for-profit news websites and companies do a really good job of delivering information, but they also fail us because they're in a race to get attention. So if all the other news networks cover something that a politician says, and they don't want to, they think that's not important, but if they don't cover it, they'll lose because their money, their ability to be successful depends on it. And I think the founder of CBS News said something like Donald Trump has been really good for our bottom line, or something like that. Basically, our business has never been thriving more except because of this. And the Netflix CEO recently said our biggest competitors are YouTube, Snapchat, and sleep. So there's only a finite amount of attention, and everyone is going to ratchet up. And so unless we have a conversation at that level about how do you reform what it takes to win, that you don't compete for attention by driving more engagement or swipes or clicks or scrolls or article views, but you win by doing something that fulfills human values. And we have to have a conversation about what that looks like.
So I want to come back to you at this point, Justin. So talking about optimizing for the wrong kind of attention, so quantity as opposed to quality, a scattergun approach as opposed to maybe going for greater depth. What did you find actually happened to your business when you started optimizing to get people off the site and meeting in person, which sounds crazy because then you can't track them, you can't sell to them. How did you manage that? And did it work for you? And what do you see as being the next step?
Yeah, very much so. So I can't speak so much to ad-supported sort of social and news media because I think that's a little bit of a different beast than what we do. But what you'd see in the dating app world was everyone had sort of mimicked this same interaction, which was very, very simple, but sort of gave you a lot of dopamine hits. And so if you look out there today, even the Match.coms of the world have now integrated this little swipe interface left or right on people's faces. And what we found was over time this created a degraded user experience because while it was fun for a minute, what people started to realize was that no one was actually meeting up, no one was actually getting in a relationship. We actually found that 83%, I think, of people who'd been using swiping apps over the last 4 years had never found a single relationship ever. And so we had an opportunity, I think, to go in a very different direction, to provide a very different type of experience and opportunity where even though in the old world, the next marginal decision always seemed to be like show them more people, make swiping more fun, give a more exciting sort of explosion when you match, we decided to go in a very different direction. And as a result, we're actually providing something very unique in the market for people who are over the games and ready to find something real. And now we're one of really the only players, especially in the US, who are providing that to the next generation. And so now we've seen our growth increase pretty much tenfold relative to what it was before we made this change, even though it's actually a less addictive version of what we had before.
I mean, do you think that people's values are changing around what their needs are and the sense of dissatisfaction with the options that are available to us, which means that when you do get a competitor that is so different to what is already existing, that people kind of go, oh, this is something that we haven't seen before. Do you think that's a wider trend beyond the dating arena?
I really do, because I think that the pendulum has started to swing in one direction. And I think the reason we're having this discussion, why this is a relevant topic, was because people are not finding value out of this. Like I mean, it's a struggle for me to not look at my phone, but I know that when I do, it makes me miserable. It makes me sad. It hurts my relationships. Constantly checking my phone, I can get in this like weird mode where I'm almost antisocial, and if I'm sitting at a conference like this, I won't talk to the person next to me. I'll like stare down at my phone. I mean, I was showing you this back there, but this is literally maybe I can't show this to you right now. But I have this like skull and crossbones and a big red background on my phone to remind me like not to use my phone because it's this addictive tool. It's the first thing you do when you wake up. It's the last thing you do before you go to bed, and it messes with your mind. And I'm way happier when I give myself like a 7-day digital detox.
But there has to be a better way than just cutting off the trigger completely. There have to be alternatives.
That's right.
Yeah, jump in there.
We call this the all or nothing choice. I mean, right now, so imagine a world where there's like cars, and when you get in a car, you always get in an accident. Like, so cars were this wonderful thing because they gave us this individual capability to do all these new things and go in these new places that we couldn't go before. But they also isolated us. We forget that. Like, it put us in individual boxes away from each other. And it also polluted the external environment. And I think like smartphones are like cars. They give us individual capabilities that amplify our ability to go in certain directions. But they also isolate us. And they also pollute the inner environment. So our thoughts are more polluted. It's harder to put our minds or our attention or our inner state where we would like it to be. And the answer isn't let's get rid of cars because cars get us into accidents or create this pollution. The answer is let's actually reinvent cars. Let's make cars that are green, that burn clean for people. And I think that a lot of the media that we consume is sort of burning something about our humanity. It's instead of burning oil, it's burning our humanity for breakfast and leaves us feeling a lot of times really empty afterwards. So what would it look like to have a clean burning attention economy that's actually about getting people what they really want? And how do we talk about that? What are those values? Because in a postmodern society, it's very hard to establish and agree upon what values we care about. But that's the conversation we should be having. And what are the rules of engagement to win?
Do you have any thoughts about that, Adam?
No, I mean, I think these guys really covered. I mean, Tristan's work is amazing in this area, and I think that was a perfect answer. So. And
it is possible. I'll just say really quick, people are doing it. I mean, I think Slack, for example, is changed the way that I work because it allows me to filter things. It allows me to set individual types of notifications for each individual channel. So the stuff that's really important and urgent will get signaled to me, and the other stuff I can sort of batch and check maybe twice a day or 3 times a day, and I don't get sucked into this constant stream of stuff where everything used to be in my email inbox, and I couldn't discern junk from personal messages, from like urgent professional messages versus routine professional messages. And so there are ways to design this that enhance our lives and actually make these things more useful and not at the cost of our attention and mental well-being.
So I know we've only got about 5 minutes left, so I want to close with hopefully an interesting question that you can spend a couple of minutes answering. So when we talk about UX, we often think about it in a very tech-specific context. When in fact it can really refer to any sort of system that's been designed with intent for individuals to interact with. And so in the light of last night's election results, how do you think we can empower people to shape the systems that serve them, that serve all of us, because we're all users, so that we don't end up becoming disaffected with no other recourse than just to kind of kick back?
Yeah, I mean, one of the things we started to talk about a little bit even backstage was this idea that we have all these curated experiences for us. I know you mentioned non-tech, but I'm going to bring back some tech stuff. This is a tech conference. So we think about some of these algorithmically generated news feeds. I mean, obviously there's Facebook, there's Google, there's many of them out there, Twitter. And what's happening is that we have these curated feeds, and that's great, and it's a great user experience in most cases, but when you start to filter the news a little bit, that's a different story, right? And I know Facebook got in a little trouble with their algorithm, maybe a few months ago, and I think one of the things we need to start thinking about is like how that sort of user experience is affecting our media consumption. I think that there needs to be a trade-off between the user experience in that case and what really should be a much more democratic way of viewing media.
Great,
I don't know what you guys think about that.
Done.
Well, I think I forgot your actual question, to be honest. It's been a late night.
So it's about empowering people to shape the systems that serve them.
So I think In any environment, right now, as you're sitting in this room, there are some choices that are hard to make, and there are other choices that are easy to make. This is choice architecture. This is any environment. Any environment you're in, you put something close to you, it's easy to reach for. You're probably going to reach for that more often than having to walk a mile away. So when we think about our lives and the media environments we live in, some choices, some media are easy. It's easy to make that choice, and the other things are harder to do. And when most of the stuff that we're fed is just clickbait, sharebait type stuff, we're probably going to click and share that rather than the stuff that might be true but sort of harder to find, or the long-form research stuff, right? The attention economy creates this incentive where people need to publish the most quickly written story that's least researched, because if they don't, they'll lose. So one of the structural things I think we need to have a conversation about is how can we make choices that fulfill human values easy to make, so that at the top of life's menu, those are the default choices for everybody, as opposed to you can only find the truth or find the in-depth stuff if you do a lot of work and research. And to do that, I think we needed to decouple the incentive of advertising from success, in the same way that selling energy had a perverse incentive. The more energy you sell, the more environmental pollution that creates. And so companies are more profitable the more environmental pollution that they created. What energy companies did in California in the 1970s is they decoupled revenue, how much money you make, from how much pollution you create. So meaning they basically set targets saying if you this is how much energy is good to sell, and beyond that, if you keep it at that level, consumer, the energy companies get some kind of tax break that basically gets put into research for more cleaner burning, good for us stuff. Cleaner burning energy, renewable energy. You can imagine some kind of attentional or advertising tax for companies that are actually making their money on advertising that gets put back into researching what the renewable attention economy, the clean burning attention economy that's reformed and works for human values could look like. But I'd like to see those kinds of conversations happen, and love to engage with some of you if you're interested.
Great, thank you. Justin, you've got 1 minute.
Sure. I think that the primary way that people can decide what their UX is going to look like is to essentially vote with their feet or with their whatever thumbs, and using the services in a smart and in a reasonable way, and not supporting services that lead us down the wrong path. I think, like I said, we've swung to one end as a culture, and I think we're starting to wake up and realizing what the sort of negative ramifications of that can be. And I think as a culture we'll start to self-correct across. I mean, I feel like this is touching on politics, this is touching on UX and psychology, but we're starting to see, I think, the ill effects of unconstrained attention economy grabbing, and it's hurting, I think, our society, it's hurting us, and I think we'll start to wake up to that, and maybe some of these the election result that happened last night, or the Brexit vote that I'm sure many people here don't necessarily agree with, are waking us up to what can happen as a result of this attention economy and like short sound bites instead of like well-researched fact-finding. And so I think we have to just learn to start voting with our attention and with our thumbs.
Voting with our attention. For that, I will say thank you, all three of you, for joining us, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of the Web Summit. Thank you. All right.